Thank you, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. There's, of course, a lot of talk about transition. We need to talk about supply and demand. And if you look at the world, it's using more oil, actually, than ever. Demand is outpacing expectations again this year, really raising questions about when we'll see peak consumption. So, Minister, let me start off with you. Can you give us some of what you see in terms of supply and demand for oil and gas in the next couple of years?
Well, thank you for inviting us all to be here. The main thing that drives demand is economic growth and people growth. So if you look at the expectation of having 1.5 billion to 2 billion people on this earth joining us all here in the next 30 years or so, it means that you're going to need more energy, whether it's for power, you're going to need more petrochemicals for everything that we're using daily in plastics and everything that's related to the petrochemical products that we use every day. So the growth is going to be there, the demand is going to be there. When people talk about transition and having renewable energy, I think renewable energy is going to play a big role with additional solar, additional wind. But because of the intermittency, you're going to need, a backup to have a sustainable power all day long when the sun is not shining or when the wind is not blowing. So the requirement for power from fossil fuels is going to be there, and it's going to be there for a very long time. And you need to also realize that 1 billion people today don't have basic power that we all enjoy. So we need to also be fair to that population and make sure they have access to reasonably priced power.
We'll talk a little bit then about what's the right way of seeing the transition. But Patrick Pouyanné, TotalEnergies is doing a lot of expanding in LNG products. I'm thinking of Mozambique, I'm thinking of Rio Grande, Papua New Guinea. How do you see the LNG market landscape? Is there a danger that we're in surplus, actually, at the end of the decade or in 15 years?
Today, no. Today, you see even because of the European market becoming an LNG market after the Russian-Ukrainian war, you see that we are in a tense market where, in fact, supply is even short demand. So tomorrow, we have more projects coming on stream. It's true. You forget Qatar, by the way, in my portfolio, maybe because you wanted me to say that we are together with Qatar in all the projects. Fundamentally, we believe gas is part of the transition. Gas is the best way to make flexible power to complement the intermittency of renewables. Gas is a way to get out of some coal, so replacing. So it's good transition. So there is a market there for gas, for LNG. Of course, it's a commodity, so you don't never match supply and demand. So probably we'll have, by 2027, 2030, quite a lot of supply. But when there's quite a lot of supply, what is good is when the price is going down, so it attracts new customers. Countries like India, for example, are really looking to building infrastructure for using gas, city gas, distributing gas. So I think it will be a good, after having a peak, which afraid the customers, we will have maybe a softer price, and then it will attract customers, and then we regulate it. So I'm not afraid. I think there is a clear place for the gas in the transition. It's a fossil, but again, it's emit less than others. So let's think to that. And again, like His Excellency said perfectly, we have entered into the electricity business. I can tell you, all my customers in electricity, they want 24/7 electricity. And if I'm giving them only renewables and green, it doesn't work. So I have to match gas plants, gas-fired power plants, and renewables. And this model, we deploy it, for example, in Texas, and it's quite profitable to do it.
Darren Woods, your take on this? Again, there's a rise in electric vehicles, there's a rise in renewable energy, but consumption will continue rising for energy in general. So how do you see this playing out in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I think I'd agree with what both Patrick and His Excellency, the points they've made, that ultimately the demand for energy is being driven by economic growth and people's living standards rising. And there are billions of people around the planet who deserve better lives and are going to require affordable, available and reliable energy sources. And I think that's the challenge going forward while we continue to see demand. EVs, wind and solar all play a role, but they also have their limitations. And so I think the challenge for the world going forward is to meet that demand, to meet that criteria, affordable, available, and reliable power in a way that does it with less emissions. And there's the electron solutions that everyone's been focused on for quite some time. There's also the molecule solutions. Part of it is natural gas and having lower emissions through combustion of natural gas, but it also is with converting natural gas to methane, to hydrogen, and then burning hydrogen with less emissions. It's biofuels, it's capturing the carbon. There's a number of solution sets to address the broader problem statement, which is emissions, while you continue to power economic growth and people's prosperities. As we talk about it in our company, it's an and equation. You don't have to choose between one or the other. The world can do both.
And I want to ask all of you where you think we are in the cycle of the transition. But Minister, Qatar announced plans to expand production capacity to 142 million tons a year by 2030 earlier this year. Do you think you'll expand even further?
Well, when we announced that we were going to expand further, I mean, in the past, we had announced 77 million tons going up to 126 million tons. And we said that we are appraising the field further, and based on technical results of the field and the capability of the field long-term to sustain its production for other projects that we have, we'll assess whether we can do more. And after further appraisal, we found that we can do an additional 16 million tons and going to 142 million tons. And as mentioned by my colleagues, there is going to be need for gas in the future. And if you look at what Qatar is involved with our partners, and in most of the projects, the two gentlemen are with us in partnership, we're going from 77 to 142 in Qatar. And if you count what ExxonMobil and us are doing in Texas, that's an additional 18 million tons. We're more than doubling the Qatar capacity, if you will, or QatarEnergy's involvement in capacity over the next few years. So we think there is a big demand in the future, and we're going to expand to meet that demand. But I think technical capability of doing more in Qatar is going to be assessed in the future. And if there is more, we probably will do more. But also, we're a big explorer around the world, one of the largest holder of exploration blocks in the world, and some with my colleagues here. And if we find gas or oil, we would increase the capacity. We think we're very bullish on the demand going forward. And as mentioned, there is going to be a glut, if you will, of a lot of projects coming, mainly from Qatar and our project in Golden Pass, and some from my colleagues here in Mozambique and other areas. And there is going to be additional demand, but I think if economic growth, everybody is trying to get the inflation down and so on. If we have a reasonable economic growth going forward, I think you'll see that all the supply and demand will catch up, and you'll need another phase of development of gas in the 2030 plus. I don't think gas is going away anytime soon, and as evident by what the G7 said, just a year and a half ago or so, that we need more LNG. In the past, they were saying no more gas, no more fossil fuel. Now they're saying that we need more LNG, and a lot of countries are taking a 180-degree turn. Even the EV discussion that people were talking about, you see a lot of people backing off a little bit, I think.
But can I ask you an update on the North Field East? So when are you expecting the first shipment to happen? And do you have any longer-term agreements on that?
North Field East and South are on track. We're in the construction as we speak. All the construction is going very well. The second question was additional sales?
Longer-term agreements, actually.
I think one thing I want to mention is last year in this conference, I was asked by you whether we're going to have difficulty selling additional LNG, if you recall. And one of your nice Bloomberg editors actually came out that same night saying that Qatar is going to have a difficulty selling LNG. I just want to report back to you that since then, we've actually secured 25 million tons of long-term LNG sales. And I can tell you also on this podium that we're signing more this year.
See, it's great to have a yearly update.
Our marketing team is doing a great job.
We should do it, bi-yearly to have every 6 months update.
I don't think there's a problem of selling LNG. Everybody that's buying LNG is stopping in Qatar, and with my colleagues with other projects. I think it's just agreeing on terms and conditions and pricing. That's always the sticking point to finalizing things. But I think there's a huge demand out there, whether it's from Asia or Europe. And I think even Europe is realizing now they have to do something different to secure long-term. They've been very lucky with 2 warm winters.
So, Patrick, how should we look at the global energy transition? Is it taking a back step? Is it parallel? What did we misunderstand 2-3 years ago about how this would develop?
In fact, the word which is important is transition. The things will not happen in a night, like some people are dreaming, because again, some fundamentals is that population is growing, energy demand is growing. And in fact, when you look to what happened, for example, last year, it's true that we invest more and more and more in decarbonized energies, renewables, biofuels, etc. But last year, because the increase of demand on a single year, it covered these additional decarbonized products, only covered 40% of the additional demand in a year. So we are yet to cover with what is energy of today. And so, as I like the expression of Darren, the end equation, we are in a real world today. It's our energy, fossil fuels. We need to continue to produce and never forget that there is a natural decline, not in Qatar, but in many oil fields, There it's growing, it's a natural growth, but it's quite an exception, a natural decline. And so on one side, we have to maintain the existing system, what I call the system A, and of course we have to build and invest more and more in the system B. But we are not yet at a pace to cover the additional yearly demand. So when people tell us we'll have to just keep on one side, no. So the transition is happening, it's serious. Last year we built in the world 550 gigawatts of renewables, but it's still not enough. So it is happening. Innovation is coming, but the EV deployment will take place by 2035, 2040, in not every place. You had just before us the president of Indonesia. You could ask him, for them, the priority is to get people out of poverty. That's the reality. It was his speech. So we need to face that reality. So the transition cannot go at the same pace everywhere in the world. And it was one of the pragmatism statements of COP28. It cannot be every pace everywhere in the world, emerging countries, developed countries. And the developed countries should not impose their views to everybody. And if you say that, yes, it's happening, but it will be gradual, slow, and I would say gradual. Even in our countries, developed countries, because there is a point which is fundamental, it's the affordability of energy. It's so important for the lives of the people. You can see the French, the German farmers, they were angry because we want to increase their price of diesel for their tractors. So we have to keep that in mind. So it's fine-tuning the balance between more sustainability for sure because of climate, but also keeping the affordability and reliability. And that's the equation, which is not an easy one. And I can tell you, I think we are doing our best. We are not, all of us are engaged in a way in different parts of this transition, the molecules, the electrons. It's not a matter, it's different views, and we need all of that. In fact, we need all energies. And so, yes, it will take time, but it does not mean that we not progress. We progress. And then the society, in fact, fundamentally, society means the demand patterns will dictate the pace of the transition. There is a wrong idea that the supply will dictate it. No, it does not happen like that. Of course, we need to supply, but the society will tell us. And society is also the car manufacturers. There was a big enthusiasm for EV, and suddenly, 2-3 years after, no, today they tell us maybe the customers are a little reluctant to pay 10,000 euro more for a car. Of course, they are more reluctant. So that's the pace of it, and that's what transition is clear.
Of course, but there's a lot of tension, Darren, right? Because if we're going to hit the targets, then the transition needs to be sped up. So are we slowing it down again, or is it just a perception?
I think what's happening is we're starting to bring realism into the discussion. I mean, I think understanding the global energy system, the scale of that system, the important role that it plays in everybody's life around the world, and then thinking something that's been built over 150 years, trillions and trillions of dollars of investments that's playing such a critical role in the economies around the world, how you transition out of that system. And I would say transition from a higher carbon emission system to a lower carbon emission system. We started out with a very narrow solution set focused on wind and solar and EVs, and assumed or aspired that that would address the total set of the issues, and it doesn't. We need to be more realistic around, to Patrick's point, there are a lot of solutions that are going to be required. We should stay focused on the problem statement, which is emissions, and reducing those emissions, and less focused on exactly how to achieve that, and let every company, every sector, all technologies compete for the most cost-efficient way to reduce those emissions, and we will make progress much faster, which will mean making today's system more emissions efficient, while we introduce new systems that have lower emissions. And then with time, you will transition and we'll make progress. I think we've made a big mistake, one, by narrowing the solution set too soon, and we haven't been serious because we've taken out the companies who actually have the best understanding of the system, and frankly, a lot of the capabilities required to transition the system. And so I think a more realistic approach, one that opens the aperture on solution sets, and then one that engages the industries that have the capabilities to contribute effectively.
Minister, do you worry about the LNG market being oversupplied this decade? How quickly could that happen?
I think being if I can just add to what my colleagues were saying on the transition, I think the promises were made, the majority of the promises were made by officials that are politicians, that really don't understand the details of how you can achieve these transitions. And it was driven to a point where it became in vogue, if you will, for everybody to say net zero and environmental and green, and that's what got you elected. And now when reality came in to actually implement the plans that they were talking about in COP26, let's say, okay, 5-6 years later, they're saying we can't achieve what we're talking about. So reality kicks in, and now you're saying that, do you actually back off some of the targets? I think the targets were overstretched targets that you can't reach anyway. So anyway, on LNG supply, I think that there is going to be a need for LNG for a very long time. The European market seems, from officials that you are discussing, I was with Kadri Simpson, with Her Excellency Kadri Simpson, basically the energy secretary or minister of EU, with Darren Woods in Saudi Arabia just a couple of weeks ago on a panel. And the discussion was that they feel they're very comfortable in Europe. And the comfort that they get in Europe is because they had two very warm winters, and they filled up all the storages, and they didn't need to use much of it. So if you have two harsh winters or normal winters, you're going to be depleting. So I think Europe is going to need a lot more LNG, and the world will need much more LNG with the growth, and I don't see an oversupply.
You talked about the frustration of some politicians. I think Patrick Pouyanné is looking at possibly listing in the US. I don't know whether that's frustration with politicians or frustration with the investor base that maybe don't fully understand what you're trying to do. But will you move your listing to the US?
Look, it's quite easy. There is no emotion. It's a question of business. What we observe is that we have more and more US shareholders. Today, we can only offer them ADR, and we want to offer them shares. That's all, because we have more and more US shareholders, and we have less European shareholders, including French shareholders, probably because of all the debate about ESG, etc. That's the reality. And then you see quite a difference of valuation between the US markets and the European market. So it's a fiduciary duty for the board of TotalEnergies to study. So I said we'll study, and then when we have studied, we will come back. And again, it's not a matter of politics, it's a matter of business. And I'm happy to see that all the French politicians want to keep TotalEnergies. By the way, we never said we will leave France. I repeat, we'll stay in France, we'll be listed in France. The question is, can we offer some shares to our US shareholders? That's technical and no matter of emotion. What is more important is the gas, to be honest. from New York, just to tell you the truth.
I mean, the listing is quite important.
No, it's not so important, because again, the company is in good shape. We are very happy. We have a growth. We are, I could say, in front of the most profitable major last year. So it's sorry for that, but even investing in renewables. So we have a clear strategy. The strategy will not shift, which is more fundamental to me.
Yeah.
There is a clear strategy. We are consistent. We will deliver. It's gas. It's electricity. It's oil. That's part of it's energies, TotalEnergies, and that's more important to me.
Our editor-in-chief also spoke to President Macron Monday, who said he wouldn't be happy if you left France. But Darren, would you welcome more listings, even of European-based companies in the U.S.?
Yeah, I think there's a more fundamental issue here, which is the approach that policymakers and politicians around the world are taking to drive the outcomes that they're looking for and the policies they're putting in place to achieve those outcomes. If you look at what's happening in Europe, our perspective, because we have quite a large business in Europe, is the policy being put in place is very prescriptive and very focused on how to achieve an outcome. So you're relying on politicians and policymakers, to His Excellency's point, that don't have a true understanding of how things actually get done within certain industries to prescribe how to then conduct business. That puts a huge burden on the businesses. It makes them very uncompetitive. And on a global market, particularly in the industry that we're engaged in, global markets are liquid all around the world. And in order to compete, you need to have bring as much to bear in that competition as possible. The U.S., if you take what they're doing in policy making, particularly around climate with the IRA, it's more focused on the outcomes and looking at carbon intensity and encouraging businesses to find ways to meet those outcomes and keeping, at this point, the aperture open around how best to achieve that. That engages the technology firms, that engages the market forces, that engages the companies to find the best solution at the lowest cost to achieve the outcome. That's a much better competitive environment to operate in. I think that's one of the big challenges between the U.S. and Europe, quite frankly.
You look, it works, what Darren said. Look on the methane. When you speak about natural gas, the counter-argument is methane. Since in Glasgow we discovered there is a lot of a question of methane, the industry has taken that seriously, and we are all engaged in clear roadmaps, and we target through net zero methane by 2030, and in Permian, and we have the solution. So if the objective is set, you need to reduce the emissions, even to really strive down the emissions. We are able to do it. We take the challenge and we find a solution. So I think this is a way to interact between the policymaker and our companies. Let's trust each other. Let's not try to regulate. In fact, what is wrong today is to think the transition can only go through regulation. No, it could go also by innovation, trust, and working together.
I think focusing on the outcomes, and the outcomes being lower emissions, and then engaging the relevant players to best find the path forward to achieving those outcomes are going to get you much faster results at a much lower cost and a much larger scale. And we're demonstrating that today where the policy is right, and we're demonstrating how encumbered businesses can become when the policy is not right.
Minister, does it make a difference when you're looking for a business partner on where they're listed because of
No, we have a criteria of choosing, partners on different criteria. The two gentlemen sitting here, ExxonMobil and Total, are some of the best companies in the world, and other IOCs that participate with us. And we develop our partnership based on trust, on history that we have together. And I think that it has to be a win-win on both sides, and we understand that, and we respect each other, and we're very happy to have this partnership. Where they're listed is their own direction of what they think is best for them.
Darren, are you expecting some of the U.S. energy policy to change if there's a change in administration in the U.S.?
I mean, I think you always have to assume that as administrations come in, they'll review what's happened, previous administration decisions, and then make judgments on those. But frankly, the way we plan for our business, the decisions that we make have time horizons that extend well beyond any single administration. So we tend to focus more on the fundamentals of what's required to grow the business or to address the issues, and then basically lobby for those fundamentals to do what's right and how to achieve the best outcomes.
Could there be a change in the IRA?
I think that'll be reviewed, but I think if you look at some of the fundamentals there and the fact that it is focused on an outcome, and if you look at the actions being taken around the states in the U.S., it's a pretty diverse group of states and companies across these states that are contributing in this space. And so I think you've got a mix of political backgrounds in terms of where the IRA is manifesting itself. So I'm not sure it's going to be, such a clear cut.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.